let's please stand for the pledge. Mr. King, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Carter. Here. Walther.
Here.
Epperson.
Here.
Barstow.
Here.
Hampshire. Here. Hicken.
Here.
Lee.
Here. Okay, we have a full council here tonight, and.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Point of order, I need to recuse myself from this one.
You need to recuse yourself from this public hearing?
Yes, for ZON 13003.
All right,
I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for this, and
let the record show that Mr. Epperson is recusing himself. Abstaining or recusing, what's the best way to do that?
He's recusing.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, the following rezoning application is being considered tonight for its, and of course we'll have 3 readings, but rezoning application ZON-19-003 to rezone property located at 6031 Summit Road Southwest, parcel number 063-141-474-00.000, totaling plus or minus 84.30 acres in the city of Pataskala from medium low density residential R87 zoning classification to Plan Development District PDD zoning classification. Scott, what do you have for me, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, this property is considered for rezoning from R87 to a planned development district. It is located at the unimproved property at 6031 Summit Road. This is ordinance 2019-4354. So to give a context on where we are, Summit Road running north and south. Here's Cleveland to the south, Broad further to the south here. So in summation of property, it's 84.18 acres. There's 2 frontages, approximately 1,200 feet on Summit Road and approximately 950 feet on Cleveland Road. There's existing tree lines on the northeast and south property lines. As stated, it's currently zoned R87, medium low density residential. So based upon the acreage and lot size R87, it could be approximately 42 units per acre in this instance. Here's an enhanced view, Summit to the west, again Cleveland to the south, and we see the tree lines north, east, and southern property lines. So zoning history on the property, this has been considered for development into residential subdivision 3 times previously. This occurred in 2001, 2005, and 2007, all proposed to go to the Planned Development District, and these previous applications were not approved by City Council. So the proposal is to develop the property into a 183-lot planned development district known as Sage Point. This would be done in approximately 6 phases at this time. They would also dedicate 10 acres of frontage on Cleveland Road to the Licking Heights School District. Preliminary conversations with the school district said they are considering using it for a bus garage. And again, they're proposing to rezone to the planned development district. So summary of the proposal. 183 units with a density of 2.17 units per acre. The acreage in residential lots, about 31. Open space acreage is almost 30 acres. And as I mentioned, 10 acres to the Licking Heights School District. Here's a layout of the proposed subdivision. Again, Summit, Cleveland, here's the 10 acres that would be proposed to be dedicated to the school district. So general summary of the lot sizes: a minimum lot width of 57 feet with a minimum lot size of 0.16 acres. Minimum setbacks: front 25, side 8 each, and rear 20. Minimum house size is 1,300 with a basement, 1,450 without. That is in line with the code. And the maximum house height is 35 feet, also in line with the code. Here's a layout of typical lot sizes based upon those specifications I mentioned. So access, one access point would be a boulevard entry from Summit Road onto Sage Point Avenue. This would be directly opposite of Windward Drive. This would require a left turn lane to be installed. There's also one emergency access drive from Sage Point Avenue to Cleveland Road. This would be constructed with Phase 4, and this would be constructed to fire district standards. The portion within the 10-acre dedication would be improved once the 10-acre parcel is developed by the school. So it would be improved from emergency access to full access. There's also one sub-street that goes south on Lavender Lane. So here's a highlight of the proposed entrances. We have the one from Summit Road, the emergency access down to Cleveland, and as I mentioned, once this were to develop, this emergency access would be developed into a full access road, and then we have the sub-street here. So signage, there'll be one subdivision identification sign off of Summit Road. It would be hanging sign suspended from a wood pergola, and the sign would be in the right-of-way in the middle of the median. So there's a general outline of what the sign would look like and its location within the median. Landscaping, street trees are proposed at every 50 feet with 7 different species. The existing tree lines would remain unless there's dead or diseased trees or where development would be occurring. At that point, they would be removed. 78 trees are being removed. Per the code, 220 replacement trees are required. However, the applicant is proposing 238. Of these, 183 would be located on individual lots and front yards. There would also be 6 to 7 foot high mounding between the detention basins and home sites in reserves A and B. This is along the Summit Road portion of the development. Also, there'd be 3 6-foot wide asphalt paths. There would be a tot lot in Reserve D as well. So there's a general outline of what we're looking at. As I mentioned, there's the mounding with the landscaping along Summit Road. Tot lot located here. And then, I know it's difficult to see, but the asphalt paths would be in these general areas there. So the comprehensive plan states or recommends the property as medium density residential. Based upon that designation, it's a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. So in this instance, it would be approximately 2.17 units per acre. The proposed minimum lot size in this development would be 0.16 acres. However, based upon the density of 2.17, it would be in line with the density recommended in the future land use map. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended disapproval on November 6th of last year. It was recommended for disapproval by a 2-3 vote with 1 abstention. The concerns expressed, I listened to the minutes today, revolved around drainage, the 10-acre dedication to the schools, density, school overcrowding, traffic, the number of divergences, which is 5, and the timing of the installation of the emergency access with Phase 4. Surrounding properties, north is rural residential and is currently a farm field. East is manufactured home residential and medium low density residential. Summit Ridge Estates and single family homes are located to the east. South is R87 and M1 light manufacturing. This is single family homes and miscellaneous businesses. And to the west is Planned Development District and R20 with the Glenbrook subdivision and single family homes. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Wayne, I need to ask Mr. Zetz something. Mr. Zetz, because in this application of the proposal for dedication to Licking High Schools, do I need to recuse myself from the discussion?
I think you should, because you could be using your position to
I agree.
influence either your employer or gain a thing of value for your employer and arguably you.
Okay. So for the record, I'll be recusing myself from the discussion.
Very good. Questions for Scott?
I have no for Scott.
Andy?
You had mentioned this is per the comprehensive plan. Is that the existing comprehensive plan, or is that for both the existing and draft comprehensive plan?
Just for the existing.
The existing. And the draft comprehensive plan, I did not have a chance to go look that up. Do you know offhand what the designation is for that area?
I don't know offhand, but we didn't consider it since it hasn't been adopted by
Sure.
council.
Okay. Couple other questions. The Windward Drive, does it have a left turn currently at Summit?
I believe it does.
So the opposing left turn will not be a problem.
That's correct.
And then on the emergency access, I assume a traffic study was done for this?
It was.
And did the traffic study take into account or have any comment to when the emergency access turns into a full access on Cleveland? Are there any concerns about turning movements on Cleveland, or, you know, Cleveland is a very, in my opinion, an underdeveloped road, small, narrow road at best. Does it have any issues with that turning movement for either bus traffic or residential traffic?
Neither the public service director or city engineer expressed any concerns with that.
The 35% open space, does that meet, this is an R20 essentially, is what we're looking at, correct?
Essentially.
Criteria. The 35% open space, does that meet the R20 criteria? I don't know if you commented to that in your presentation.
We are looking at the plan development district regulations that require a minimum of 35%, so that is in line with the plan development district regulations.
And offhand, do you remember what the requirements are in an R20 development
For open space,
for open space?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Higgins?
I just have a request. I realize that this will be going through readings. Would you confirm that, I mean, you maybe can answer this straight up, but the service director, this is regarding the size of Cleveland.
Mhm.
And a whole bunch of buses belching out, onto Cleveland, and a whole bunch of people leaving a housing development at the same time. Will you confirm whether or not that was kind of like brought up to them to see if they have any feelings about that?
I will do that.
And I don't think, I think you would have told us, but I just wanna check, if Licking Heights chooses not to, put in a bus garage for 10 years, does that stay as an emergency access only?
Correct.
Okay, and when I think of emergency access, I think of like, I don't know, like a dirt road looking thing, that maybe there's a fence that falls down, or, you know, like Batman drove in and out of it, just kinda goes like this, and you drive the fire truck right over it to get in, right?
Typically what they do, it's called grass pavers, so it's concrete and it's a weave pattern and the grass goes up between them. So essentially, us driving by would not be able to see it, but typically there's identification for where the fire district comes in and they know where it is to access the property.
Okay, and then, can you explain what a substreet does? You talked about the substreet that seems to stub out right in the middle of the,
The stub street,
is it stub or sub?
stub.
Okay, is that put there because maybe someday the plot of land below it,
That's correct, would
Okay.
develop.
and if that happens, would they anticipate, just out of curiosity, running that, you may not know this either, all the way down to Cleveland?
There's the potential for that, yes.
Thank you, and if you'll see if they did think about that,
I will do that.
I'd be grateful, thank you.
Andy?
I didn't know if anybody else had anything, but as far as the open space that is in this plan, is that open space that is retained by the HOA, or is that dedicated in some kind of reserve? What happens with the open space?
It'll be dedicated in reserves owned by the HOA, so it'll be responsible for maintenance.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Scott? Yes, sir.
Just to Mr. Higgins' point, we have one of those in my homeowner's area, and we don't have, however, the bat cave gate that Mr. Higgins does. I'll talk to my HOA president about getting one of those installed, but seriously, yeah, the thing that bothers me about this the most is the current width that Mr. Walther talked with us of Cleveland Road. I mean, that is a heavily traveled but very narrow road, and the buildings and houses are close in on that, so lighting it would be, I think, Andy, a big issue, because the houses are all, they're right close. Was there a traffic study done?
There was a traffic study completed, and at the time with the emergency access, it showed no improvements were needed on Cleveland Avenue.
How many houses is this proposing?
183.
183, so that would be, these are all gonna be single-family homes, correct?
Correct.
So, any idea on how many school-age children that would have the potential to encompass? I mean, just hard to say, but
I think I did some research on this for another project, and its national average was slightly over 2.
We'll be talking 375, 60 children for Richmond Heights schools, I mean, roughly.
Plus or minus dependent upon.
Sure, obviously, I mean, it's just like roughly 350 to 375. Okay. All right.
When it's all built out, how many phases?
Right now, 6.
6?
All right.
And, okay, so the quick division, how many houses per phase then, real quick?
That varies dependent, and sometimes as you go through the
30?
the phasing process, that can adjust depending upon market conditions.
It's just not dividing it into it, it could be
Correct.
different. Okay. Any other questions for Scott? Yes, sir.
Scott, as far as Lincoln Heights, and I certainly understand Mr. Barstow's question, were they concerned at all? Did they issue any kind of either letter in support or letter in non-support or opposing?
There was a letter included in the staff report.
Okay.
There actually, just a point where there, Andy, there were two different letters from Dr. Wagner.
Okay.
Just FYI.
I'll have to look at that. I didn't see
Yeah,
that.
they were in there.
Okay.
I think there's differences. I think there's differences in the two letters. One in February, I think one in August.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that from last year? Is that right, Scott? Sorry,
Correct.
but that's just, yeah.
Are they both letters of support?
Well, I would completely frank, I mean, I would take anything, since the school district is getting 10 acres, I guess, of free, is this being donated to the school district? So you're getting 10 acres, how much is that 10 acres worth, Scott?
I honestly don't know.
Okay, so it's worth something. So I would take anything that Licking Heights says about this with a grain, maybe 2 grains of salt. Maybe I should say 10 acres of grains of salt, quite frankly.
Mhm.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut into you there, I'm sorry.
Nope.
Anything else, folks? All right. We'll move into the, anything else you want to wrap up on your presentation there?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We'll move into the public comment phase. Anybody?
Don't we get to present?
Oh, do they have a presentation
Yeah,
also?
they do.
Okay,
Typically
not
get
aware?
present.
Come on up,
Okay,
make your
great.
presentation.
Thank you.
Name and address, please, for the
Sure.
record.
Connie Klima, P.O. Box 991, Pataska, Ohio, here representing the developer. I want to begin by just talking about what goes on to get to where we are today. Actually, 2 years ago in 3 months, this process started for this developer. This was back in October of 2017. And at that time, the city was in a little bit different of a situation. There was no moratorium. There was no discussion too much about what was going to be happening in the city of Pataska in the future. But people were starting to come here, obviously, and wanted to live here. Fisher Homes was one of the developers that wanted to try and come here and start developing in addition to its settlement, et cetera. This particular site at Summit and at Cleveland Road was one that we immediately went to talk to Dr. Wagner about at the school, because we knew how he can be opposed to developments, and because of the fact that the population in the schools was growing, and the idea of developing enlargement to the school. We started discussing it with him. I met with him probably 3 or 4 times in the last 2.5 years. And basically, he did not come out, or their committee did not come out against this development. And one could say, well, it's because they're getting 10 acres. I don't know the reason, but they did not officially come out with a letter saying they oppose this. But they did like the idea of having the 10 acres, and the idea then was a bus garage. 2 years and 3 months may have changed that, but they would like to have this property. So my client, throughout the time, we met with staff in October. In December, met with the school. In April 2018, we had a concept plan review before the Planning Commission. This was over a year ago. The idea was, are we gonna come in and we have an R20 future land use plan that says that we can have a density of 2.17 acres? Or are we gonna go with a straight zoning and have a larger lot? Or are we gonna go with a PMUD? Just to give you an idea of what a straight zoning would look like, I'm gonna show you on this particular property. As you can see, here's the property border. We've got a lot of the storm ponds up here, which I'll explain later. But here's the perimeter of the site, and here's what we were talking about giving to the school. So you can start seeing what the site looks like in addition to the additional stormwater. Now, why did the stormwater become such a prominent part of the design? Well, we also found out from our original engineering reports and stormwater studies, and also our public hearing before the Planning Commission, that a lot of people, and anybody that travels on Summit, knows that there's a lot of water issues on this site. In fact, Scott said that 3 different times this site was looked at for development and was turned down in the early 2000s, and I was in those meetings, not representing them, but remember why. It's because the ground is always soggy, and where is the stormwater going to go? There are so many issues there. If you build houses, it's going to be a real problem. Well, when Fisher Combs came in and got that word, they hired their stormwater engineers to start finding out what the problem was. And they recognized the fact that when Glenbrook was developed, there's a stormwater line that goes down Summit. And they sized it out to be 5 or so more acres that was going to be going to that particular area for drainage. When actually it was in surplus of 30-some acres that should be drained there, and it is draining there. So, having been in the history way back when this was going through, I said, if you do anything on this site, before you do anything, see if you can fix it. Because that's gonna be the first thing that any council member to ask. So the stormwater people went to work and determined that in order to fix it, we're going to have to take a lot of the drainage that would be going from our site to here and holding it longer. And making sure that we don't add to that and take away what's happening now on this property. All of it's draining in there in addition to theirs. So what they did is they oversized the stormwater areas, placed them in areas that would serve as beautifying wet ponds, especially when you come in, setting houses back farther, that type of thing, and started working on a site plan that would open more space for green space and also accommodate the ponds, which is what Scott's been showing you. Now, when you compare that to what I showed you before, you see all the green space, you see the ponds. Also, as we started going through this process, as I said, 2.5 years or so, we started learning from the Planning Commission, which we went to 3 to 4 times, after we came back here and also had a meeting with your development committee, that it would probably be best to keep this design, but to also address the real issues that came about with not having large lots. We're going to have a lot more open space, but we're also going to make sure that we have side yards that are larger than what usually you have typically. They wanted at least a 16-foot difference between each house. We decided that we would do that. So I'm going to go through quickly what happened. We went from 230 or so, 211 back down to 183 to keep in conformance with your future land use plan. We went from over 35, almost 36 acreage in residential lots down to 31, almost 32. We had about 28 acres in open space from our original PMUD plan and raised it up to over 29. We took our density from over 2.5 units per acre down to 2.17 to accommodate your future land use plan. And originally, we included the 10 acres that we're giving to the school in our open space, because it says in your code that if you're giving open space that's going to be used for a school or something, it's counted as toward your 35%. But there was a discussion within the zoning department that said, but we don't know for sure it's going to be used for a school, and if it's a bus garage a school, so it should be separate. So we added additional 10 acres in our development for green space in addition to the 10 acres that we're giving the school. So it's not even counted. So when you look at the full acreage of this site, only 32 acres or so are used for the actual house lots, and the rest is used for stormwater facilities, open space, and the school site. We have a boulevard entry that comes off Summit Road. That boulevard entry could be sufficient for fire and used as a second access, similar to what happened over on Broad Street with that development. But when we talked to the school, they obviously wanted access. Fire department wanted to have a fire access. And all of that was decided and agreed to originally on, but as it went through the process of 2 years and whatever, comments from the zoning commission, that type of thing, it was decided that why not just go ahead and make it a full access when we get to phase 4. Traffic study basically had no issues with that and actually told us that our one entrance was plenty. That access right there is just an additional help for fire and also for the school coming in and out. Some of the we can sit here tonight and usually the things that someone basically dislikes come out. People talking about, oh, giving 10 acres to the school, what's going to happen if it's not developed, that type of thing. We felt that it was a good dedication of land that was something the school wanted and was a benefit. And I would prefer if you would say, let's say we don't even own that acreage, it's the schools, and that's, if we get approved, that's what goes there. And if you just look at our development itself for what we've done, we took the school area, donated it, we added emergency access. But let's get on to the streets. We removed stub streets. The only stub street we had is basically required by the code. We had stubs going here and here. Zoning did not want them, zoning commission did not, planning commission did not want them, so we stubbed only one. We had eyebrows instead of full cul-de-sacs. We removed those. We reduced cul-de-sac lengths. We increased pavement widths. And we added the boulevard-style entrance to accommodate traffic and for emergency and for beautification. Improvements on Summit Road, we added a turn lane. We added a sidewalk on Summit Road as requested by the Planning Commission and by the school. We dedicated additional right-of-way along Summit Road to the city. We agreed to landscape the ponds and maintain the rural feel. So if you're driving down Summit, you don't look over and see a house, you see a pond and quite a large distance there before you even get to where the houses start. We added a 12-inch water line going through the site, which that extension will be able to move on to others. Completed a stormwater report for the drainage area, oversized our stormwater ponds, exceeded our stormwater requirements, improved downstream conditions for the Glenbrook subdivision, and alleviating surrounding stormwater and drainage issues. Our open space was increased in the size. We added our tot lot as required. By the way, an R20 straight zoning requires no open space. The only thing it requires is a tot lot, which we already have. We added asphalt paths so they won't wash out. Created a tree preservation easement and buffer that goes along the perimeter of the site. And we also have most of our homes, because of this plan, almost all of our home sites back up to green space. Nobody's backyard is in your backyard. That is one of the efficient things of this type of a design with the smaller lots. In addition, as Scott said, we increased our side yards for emergency purposes, and basically the lot delineations themselves being smaller lots, but keeping the density that's requested in your future land use plan. I've worked with Fisher Homes, not this whole time, but for over 1.5 years on this site. And after the last planning commission meeting that we had before November, I said, go through the list of everything they've asked and do almost everything you can. Satisfy everything. They did. The only diversions they have, if you look at the diversions, are basically to permit more stormwater on the site and take up more open space, which fixes a problem. To have a higher sign than typical and have it be out waving instead of having it on two sides. Our diversions are basically more for improvements and taking care of issues than anything else. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Scott, do these so-called, we have retention ponds, detention ponds, and ponds. What are these gonna hold water all the time? Hold water just when it's wet? What are they gonna look like on a full-time basis?
Retention ponds hold water, detention ponds detain it and hold it back and releases it slowly.
What are these gonna be?
Retention ponds,
Retention ponds.
retention ponds.
Tommy?
I had a question for Ms. Kleeman. Sure. We're allowed to do that, we can do that.
Sure.
Ms. Kleeman, I don't need an answer on this tonight because, obviously you'll need to go back and talk to your client about it. This rezoning's on the, same track as far as the three readings as our proposed design standards. They'll be voted on the same night, 6 weeks from now. My question is would your client, if those design standards are approved, would your client be willing to work with the city and meet those in this development?
Well, it's interesting, of course, because we saw these and saw they were coming up, which is why I showed up early to hear it. If you read the actual code, it talks about when you have a PUD and you're already committed to certain design standards, that those would be what qualify. And basically, their designs basically qualify in many ways. There's some details that would not. For instance, the location of the garage would not be set back as we were discussing. But the majority of what they do more than satisfies the aesthetics of your goals. So there are a few that would not, and these are the houses that they actually have planned for this particular site.
So maybe the question is then if, let me break it into two questions. First, is would they be willing to meet what we have? And the second question would be if they're not willing, something that would be helpful is maybe some type of a checklist. We're reading these, but these are the ones we're not.
Certainly.
That would be helpful for me. I don't know if it would be helpful for the rest of council, but I'd really like to know if they'd be willing to work with us and meet those as we move forward. And like I said, I don't need an answer on that tonight. You need to go back and talk to them, but that would be helpful for me at least.
Okay, that'd be great. I'd be happy to do that. Good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Barstow brought to my attention, we just have to be very careful tonight because we have a 6:30 public hearing. We still need to get the public comments, so, just keep it, and if you have questions that she needs to, Connie will need to answer or get answers to, just be considerate of the time. Go ahead, Andy.
I have just two really quick questions. On the bus garage location, the 10 acres, when that was, if it's deeded or if it has been deeded, are there any restrictions to what that can be used for? Or meaning, if the school decides it doesn't want to put a bus garage there, is it possible to have that as open fields, like soccer fields, baseball fields, so
Yes.
forth? There's no restriction on that?
No.
Okay. And then my second question would be on the access point, and this may be contrary to what planning and zoning had wanted. Is it absolutely necessary to have that, as you described, the boulevard does supply you two access points essentially. Is it absolutely necessary to have that as a second full access to the subdivision, or can it remain as an emergency, essentially bat cave entrance
Yeah.
for the subdivision?
We actually initially requested that.
Okay, I just wondered if that was something
Yeah,
that.
and that was something though that as we went through, people said they wanted that, so we would be
Okay.
happy for it not to be.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
I have questions. Tell me how the 10-acre donation to the school came about.
10-acre donation,
To the school, how'd that come about?
meeting with the school,
Well, whose idea was it?
the school.
So the school asked for that?
The school asked if we would be willing to donate any land for a garage,
Okay,
yes.
okay. How much is that 10 acres worth? What's the value of it?
I don't know right now, and since in the last 2.5 years, I'm sure it's gone up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to public comments. Does anybody wish to speak concerning this zoning application? Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Need your name and address, ma'am, and
Yes, sir. My name is Jody Bowen. I live on Cleveland Street, in proximity, 13645 Cleveland.
could I just stop you for just one
Yes,
second?
sir.
Kathy, what do we usually do for time on a public hearing, public comments? Is it 5 or 3?
I'm not gonna be that long, I promise you.
I realize that, but it's for the other folks too, just.
Okay.
I don't think that was specified for public hearings.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Connie said that she's been working on this for 2 years. As a resident, I've attended every meeting that's resolving that's concerning this particular development, so I have my time in it as well. It's not my job, but it's where I live. I oppose it because of the high density. It's zoned for 40 houses. We went from 200 to 80. I think as this gentleman pointed out, or one of you did, I won't say which one, is that there's no right of way on that road because the houses, the way things were developed before zoning was there. It was a similar problem brought up when the trailer park went in so many years back. So in general, everything that the zoning board cited as their opposition are my oppositions as well. The 10 acres is a concern to me because that can be something else in the future. The school can sell it. That doesn't mean the school would hold on to it. And if this particular development is concerned about green space, I don't think for their landowners and surrounding area, I don't think a bus terminal is conducive to that green space. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak on this subject? Okay. Yep, it's just coming up right now. Yeah, it's hard to see. We have a full house on it too, so that's good. Yes, sir. Ma'am, your name and address, please.
I am Susan Holmes, and my address is 6334 Summit Road,
Okay.
Southwest Petoskey. Many of my comments are the same as Jody's. We're concerned that it doesn't meet with comprehensive plan, which hasn't been finalized. Dr. Wagner stated in February 27th of 2019 that he was opposed to another development that had 211 homes down off of Refugee. I don't understand why this one all of a sudden is okay. What control does Pataskala have over the donated ground? Buses are not appropriate for that site. Essentially, when you come to the corner of Cleveland and Summit, they can't even really make that turn. That intersection is terrible. Then the buses have to stop before they get to the railroad track and wait. Having buses come out, go to the elementary school, back and forth, that is just gonna be a nightmare. It's already a nightmare when you go down at the end of Summit and Broad, when school's getting out, you have cars that are backed up all the way down to Broad. Any type of, any other than soccer fields is gonna be a disaster. And once the school gets controlled, what is Pataskala gonna do? Because obviously they develop how they want, where they want, and don't actually follow the comprehensive zoning plan. Stormwater has been an issue in that area. What they're proposing, I do not believe is gonna take care of it. As far as rural character of Pataskala, I don't think 2.6 units or whatever they have now per acre consists of the rural character. But basically, it's not according to comprehensive zoning plan, and I think that's why it's been tabled so many times. And there were a lot of unanswered questions last time around when it didn't get put through. So, I don't think those things have been answered. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this topic? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Barstow.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hicken. Discussion? And just so you know, obviously, this will go into a reading mode tonight. We'll have 3 readings. There's plenty of time to come back, discuss, ask questions, those kind of things. So, roll call, please.
Walter,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hampshire,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Next meeting in 5 minutes, so don't get too comfortable.